I suspect that much, if not all, of what I'm about to say is going to sound like, or is going to be exceedingly obvious, not new, not relevant, not interesting, and so on. I get the feeling that many of you are going to get the feeling that you've heard it all before. It's understandable. For one, I'll be speaking about something that I think many of us will have heard of, learned in school, or encountered during some personal pursuits maybe. For another, I often find myself dismissing thoughts and ideas that I really would prefer not to dismiss so easily. Sometimes it is that knowledge is not understanding. Sometimes things you've seen a million times over will suddenly take on new meaning, although most of the time they don't. I say all of this at the beginning just out of caution, because I will be using words like rhetoric and dialectic and knowing and understanding. I am aware of how well-known words like these are, and I will be speaking directly on the nature of being well-known, although I suppose that I do that every time anyways. Now, I don't mean to say that I'm going to, with this short little diary, rip you out of your stagnation. I don't have that power over you or anyone else, really. It seems to me that only you can make that decision. But enough of that. There was once a man who was told that he was the wisest among all, because he knew that he knew nothing. We've heard this story and the many interpretations of his story before. Thousands of years later, we still come into contradiction with one another over the full meaning behind these words. Why is it that the implications of these words seem to be out of reach for most of us? Or is it that these implications are very much within reach, but we ourselves choose to turn away from them? The man in the story that I'm referring to is Socrates. I am not referring to Plato's Socrates, or Xenophon's Socrates, or any other writer's Socrates, but some conception of Socrates that exists out there, floating about, as a conglomeration of various versions of Socrates, all glued together. I guess I am really referring to him in his myth-like conception. Whatever the case, people will know this man. They will know his story. I suspect that many are indirectly familiar with his name through concepts such as the Socratic method or dialectics. Some, even, will look up to him, saying that Socrates' philosophy, or at least his historical existence, holds value in the realm of knowledge and understanding. Why is it, then, that these same people who supposedly value something in Socrates still act just the same as those who sought to condemn him to death? What is going on? What I really wonder about is this. To really understand the full force of Socratic questioning, individuals who hold value in Socrates' example, I believe, would not be making such unsubstantiated claims like the ones I am and have been making for this diary. In essence, were we to fully understand the implications of dialectic with regards to rhetoric, we would have to fully embrace dialectic as a means of navigating knowledge and understanding, given that we would have previously understood rhetoric to be a wholly self-sabotaging and stagnating argumentative path. It would be preferable, in this case, to reach indecision through dialectic, which seeks to understand, rather than choose some unsubstantiated position through rhetoric, which seeks to persuade. That we all still prefer rhetoric in our daily lives, that even those who say they embrace Socratic ideas will happily employ rhetorical techniques the next moment? Well, it seems there's a whole lot of knowing going on, and not that much understanding. Written word has demonstrated that it cannot serve as a medium of dialectic between individuals. I suspect that Socrates had the feeling that if he were to write anything down, such a thing would be an immense act of self-sabotage, self-betrayal, and self-deception. The duty that he wished to follow could only be carried out on an intimate, individual-to-individual basis. Anything written and made for publication served no replacement for conversation. This is, of course, not the fault of writers or readers, merely a demonstration of limitations imposed by an unescapable condition we all share. When someone has picked up a book, when they look at the cover, at the title of the book, of the name of the author, when they open the book and flip through the pages, when they read the words, all of these things the reader is very much aware of. One does not know these things. One cannot make oneself forget that they are engaging in the act of reading from a book. One can, however, deceive oneself into believing that they have left behind their situation for a short moment to engage with the words of the writer as one would do in a conversation. This self-deception is very much possible, and it is so for the majority of us, I would guess. Even discussion is not inherently dialectic, no matter how much people fetishize it for being so. Instead of being preoccupied with the act of reading a book, now you're preoccupied with the act of engaging in a discussion and believing that any more understanding will come out of it. It's not the generation of understanding that emerges from discussion, but the surfacing of knowledge that you already had, more or less, or the gathering of additional knowledge without any further understanding. This is all even before the rhetoric starts. That's when you know that all hope for dialectic has gone out the window. Even reflection is not inherently dialectic, but I think plenty of people know that, although, of course, we don't understand it. We deceive ourselves all the time, and we know about our self-deceptive behavior so much to the point where people will joke about it regularly. But that I already said enough of in another diary. I'm starting to repeat myself, aren't I? Those around you want to win over others and themselves, and so they resort to tactics of persuasion and, sometimes, trickery. You and I do too. We like to think that winning will give us that which will make us whole, but winning over others and winning over ourselves will only further us from something more. Those who do this, those who engage in rhetoric or sophistry, no matter how much they feel as if they are not at fault for participating in what ultimately is wrong, their blame and their immorality cannot be denied. We are all blameworthy because we know and are aware of what we are doing and perpetuating and suffering from. Being forgetful or losing control of one's own awareness serves as no excuse. We cannot not know the suffering that it causes us. We can certainly deceive ourselves of the truth, but we cannot lie to ourselves. What does it look like to lead a dialectic life? Who among us will forsake the comfortable suffering of a largely rhetorical one? It seems that few have chosen the former path, but those few, Their existence implies possibility that we might also choose dialectic, but they might also imply our blameworthiness. I refer to individuals who, in the face of self-suffering and ridicule, took Socratic tasks upon themselves. They first decided for themselves what a Socratic task meant to them, and then they tried in earnest to live up to those tasks. Plenty of us have heard their names, but just the same we choose not to live up to their examples. A close friend of mine put it this way, in a way which I think is very warm. We are aware of these individuals who have shouldered Socratic tasks upon themselves. Some of us can even imagine to some extent how utterly isolating their life choices were, of how much suffering lay on the path of living out these self-imposed burdens. We all get a feeling about all of this, and then we ultimately decide that we would prefer not to have to endure the same. It's understandable, I think, to most of us. A lot of these people lived short lives, intense lives perhaps, but short ones. They either burnt themselves out or were burnt out by other people. When we hear of these things, we profess some sort of admiration, but then we also choose not to follow their example. We choose to remain firmly planted in the world of rhetoric. I suppose we cannot be too surprised. Not only must someone find dialectic and then fully understand it for themselves, but the individual must also suffer the consequences of rhetoric in a profound manner, and then integrate their experienced knowledge into understanding before they can even begin to dream about escaping rhetoric. Being convinced of the values of dialectic is merely an exercise in rhetoric. It is a reinforcement of the status quo. Likewise, we have already become so numb to rhetoric as experienced in our daily lives that there is little hope to realize its nature simply by reflecting. One must fully understand to be able to escape. One must be wounded, but then choose to look at the nature of the wound, rather than bandage it up. But the likelihood of that is very, very low, and dropping by the minute. There must be something we can do